the government. It loves you and wants to keep you safe and well. It even wants to make paying taxes, fines, and court costs easier for you. How? Well, you'll need to meet your straw man. He was born the same day you were. He looks like you, has the same name, and lives in your house, but you never knew he existed. You will have even paid his parking tickets or taxes. The worst part? He's been dead from day one. From every birth certificate, a legal personality, or legal fiction, is created with the same name to confuse little old you into thinking it's you. So there is a human you and a paper you, or as it's commonly known, a straw man. So when it seems like government officials, court clerks, or the police are speaking English, they aren't. They're speaking legalese, designed to make you agree to verbal and written contracts without even knowing about it, all spun from Black's Law Dictionary. For example, when the police say, "Do you understand?" you'll say, "Yes." What they are really saying is, "Do you stand under our authority?" Oops-a-daisy, you just created a verbal contract with them. Oh, you clever government. Do you know that whenever you register something, you are handing over title to the person you register it with? That's right. Whenever you register something with the government, they assume it belongs to them. Registered your car? Super! Now you are the registered keeper of your vehicle, and the government can crush it when you don't pay your, straw man's taxes. Expecting a new bundle of joy? Well, then you need to register your little darling with a birth certificate. Then they can start the process all over again and create a new straw man for your little one. Isn't that great? So when Junior grows up, he'll be able to generate revenue just like you have. When you notify on your baby by signing the birth certificate, your child becomes a ward of state. And if the government doesn't like what you're doing, they'll assume it's okay to take the child away or make new rules for things they don't like. Not enough school? Smacking your child? Shouting too loudly? Then it's off to social services for the little one. When you get a bill, it's sent to you, but belongs to your straw man, not you. That's why bills, fines, and summons start with Mr., Mrs., or Ms. Sometimes you'll see your surname in capitals, just like on a gravestone. That's because your straw man is dead, and just a silly piece of paper, created before you could comprehend or even consent to it. When you go to court, you represent your straw man. So you, the human, take on any costs, fees, taxes, and fines involved for the straw man. The human you doesn't even need to pay them. But you made a contract with the court by appearing on behalf of your legal personality or straw man, just like the government knew you would. Confused? Well, don't worry. The government doesn't want you to know anyway. If you knew, you'd stop paying things like council tax and parking tickets. Because when you go to court, you are representing your straw man. You are you, alive and made of flesh and blood. Your straw man, or legal personality, is a piece of paper created from your birth certificate. And you think it's you. What a silly Billy.
This is a certified true copy of my live statement of birth. You can get this by applying for it.
All right. All right. All right, so let me know in the chat box, what your thoughts are on that video. Some of you have seen it before, but it's always, necessary to go back to the beginning to have that understanding of what's going on. And let me just make sure that I have, all right, here we are. Yeah, so, the day that our birth certificate was created was the day that, the doctor, whoever took the sole of the baby's foot, I always like to say SOUL and SOLE, because it's literally like giving up your whole everything, your physical body, yourself. You're no longer in control of you. And so they took the sole of the baby's foot, and created a contract agreement. This contract created then a bond, our birth certificate. So the contract was basically a corporation being created in your name in all caps. So you'll see your name in all caps on your certificate of live birth, birth record, whatever, there's so many different variations of it today. But you'll see your name in all caps, and that's representing a business entity, a corporation, like a LLC, a trust. It is a corporation with your name on it, which is why, when you think of other brands, you are your brand. When you think of brands like, I'm just throwing things out there, Nike, Burger King, it's always in all caps, and they've either trademarked or taken ownership in some way of that name. So your corporation was created, and then your actual original birth certificate went traded on. So your actual legal name is first, middle, last. So Tiara Dion Washington. And then your name that they're trading on is going to be it's your first, middle, last. And then your actual name, what we know is Washington, it's always going to be your last name, first, middle. And this is how they have taken control over us. And I'm saying the government, they have took our birth certificate and basically put it on the stock market, making it like livestock. So we were the ones backing up as collateral to this birth certificate because we are the ones representing our brand. It's just that we didn't have control over it. So the state became the trustee. We became the beneficiaries of this trust. And so for anybody that knows anything about the stock market, businesses, anybody that is desiring to go public, that is a business owner, the bank or whoever will tell you how much is the value of your corporation, and then you would put it on the stock market for that value, and then people, other businesses, whoever can pour into it and increase your equity. So with our birth certificates, our birth certificate was traded on, put on the stock market for value, and that starting value was $1 million. So if you imagine from the time it was put on, that it really depends. I don't want to say from the day you was born, because it needed to be registered. When it became registered in their system is when they put it on to be traded on. That makes sense. So if you're still with me, throw some yeses in the chat box. So your birth certificate became traded on. All right. So I needed to give that backdrop in history. All right, great. All right. So the reason why any of this happened is, first, we need to state the facts that the United States they've been bankrupt since 1788. Since 1788, the United States has been bankrupt. After the Civil War, they owed money. They didn't pay their debt and needed a loan. So that loan came from Britain. And at the end of the American Republic, which was 1933, the states had a split. So every state once was in the United States of America, once was sovereign, a sovereign nation. When the end of the Republic ended, the states were split, and it became operating on the public and private side. And the United States of America split, and the United States itself became a corporation. So the United States Corp, which is a business, and everything became operating in commerce and public, and not sovereign anymore, not caring about the people, we the people, none of that. No common law, though it still existed. It's just not how this nation continued to operate. So under that, because it became split, Who knows what the United States of America's capital is? I always ask this question. See who's the smart people in the room. No, I'm just kidding. So the capital of the United States. Who knows? Don't be shy. Put in the chat box. All right. Kim, you always answering that question first. Yes, so DC, and we need to talk about that because DC is the aka the District of Columbia and is owned by the City of London. So we have taken on London's laws and acts. And not only that, but being a nation that is bankrupt, we have needed to pay debt to the crown. So because we've needed to pay debt to the crown, this is how the birth certificate and our social security card, which I'll get into, even became a thing. But I want to back up and talk about some of the history and some of the facts of the acts that was going on in London prior to, which was going back to 1666, there was a trust created. It was an act created, actually. And I'm going to talk about the trust and the act in just a second. So I'm actually going to start, say right about. So I'm going to leave it at this screen. So I'm going to talk about the act and I'm going to talk about the 3 trusts. So there was 3 trusts that was created before the act of 1666. And this is important. So if you're just hearing this all for the first time, I encourage you to write this information down and look it up yourself. But in 1455 to 1531, there were 3 trusts set up. Cestui Que Vie is Latin for it is 6. Cestui Que Vie. All right. And that is Latin for 6. And 3 of them was created. So the first Cestui Que Vie trust that was created was that the Vatican would take all of the land. So people that were born of land in England, I think somebody's mic is on. Please mute your mics. Use the chat box. But everybody that was born in London could not have any ownership to land. So they basically, was considered a part of the land or not at all. And the Pope wanted to make sure that they took all of the land and all of the bodies. So the second Cestui Que Vie trust that was created was that everyone was declared and lost at sea, taking all of the bodies. So that was in 1481. And then 1531, the third trust was created, taking the souls of all the people. This is 1531. So England, the Vatican had taken over the land, the bodies, and the souls of people through baptism, because they were also forcing everybody to convert to the religions there. So in the midst of them, taking over everything and all the aspects of anything that people could, the Vatican took. Please mute your mic as you are coming in. Definitely awesome. Okay, all right, so we are at the act that was created. So those were the 3 trusts that was created, and now we're going into the actual act that was created. This was in 1666. There was it was called the Great Fires of London. So these were breaking out, making people hysterical. There was a lot of distractions going on, particularly so this act could be created. And when you think about all of the distractions going on today, and ask yourself, what acts, what laws, what mandates are being forced as we are caught up with our life and are busy. This is the type of things, history doesn't change, but repeats itself in many ways. And so here we are. This Cestui Que Vie Act was that everyone was declared and lost at sea, meaning that you either belong to the land or you was dead and lost at sea, but you basically had no ownership. People who were born of London, they could basically claim their estate within 7 years if they were, if they knew about it, and get a percentage of the wealth of that nation. But this act was kept from people, of course, so that they would not know about their estate and they would basically be considered dead and lost at sea. So we need to talk about the laws that the law that we're operating under, and how we're even to where we are today. So just a resource, this book right here, Reclaim Your Sovereignty, and I'll also add these resources to the chat box as well, but I'm going to read a little description in here so that we can have a better understanding of this information. All right. So I'm just going to add it to the chat box. All right. And those of you that are coming in, please just make sure your mics are muted. All right. So maritime admiralty law. There are two kinds of laws on earth: civil law, which is the law of the land, and maritime admiralty law, which is the law of the water. Maritime admiralty law is the law of banking, the law of money, and having to do with currency and commerce. Admiralty law says that because you arrived from your mother's water, you are a maritime admiralty product. When you were born, you had to have a birth certificate that had to be signed by the dock, because that's where the ship is tied, to the dock. So the dock signs your birth certificate. Why? Because you came down out of your mother's water. You came down her birth canal. You are therefore a maritime admiralty product because your birth certificate was signed by your mother, and where your mother signed on the birth certificate, it usually doesn't say parent. And I definitely know for a fact that in some states, it doesn't say parent. Please mute your mic. Let me see if I can go to see whose mic is not muted. All right, if your mic is not muted, please mute your mic. All right, says that informant on the birth certificate. So you might want to look at your birth certificate after you have not seen that area and see if it says informant. Your mother was informing the bank that she just produced another product to be bought and sold on. England, the British Crown through international banking owns your physical body, and that's law. Therefore, the bank owns your body. Now we're going to talk about the Social Security card, and I have this picture here. If you look at your Social Security card, which I'm not sure if everybody here is from the United States. However, I do know international, it's the insurance card. Here in the States, it's the Social Security card. But on the front of the Social Security card, it literally used to say account number. And you could look this up on Google. It said account number on the front. They removed that. On the back is your routing number. What is this connected to? It's connected to your treasury account, because remember when I was talking in the beginning, the state opened up an account for you because why? You have a business, you have a corporation. So they open up your business, they created an account for you, and they've been basically operating and controlling this account since your birth certificate has been registered in their system. And then you got the Social Security card, which is your insurance and your account information that connects to the private side. Your actual Social Security number, the number that you see on the front, is public. This is public. But you have a private side of banking. We've been doing public side of banking. And the goal is to become a secured creditor on the private side of banking, because we've been operating publicly, being debtors, being charged with the debt that our strawman has collected because we signed up and agreed to the fact that we are our strawman. But we can never be our strawman. We are living live souls. And it is the legalese that we need to learn in these codes and statutes and laws would exist so that we can assert ourselves in this game of commerce. All right, so did we all catch that? Let me know in the chat box if you caught that. All right. So the numbers on the back of your social security card, some are usually in red. Red designates your body. It is a serial number of stock. If you are wealthy, you are preferred stock. If you are poor, it is common stock. Your body is bought and sold through the use of your birth certificate. And actually the birth certificates used to have all of the banks on the back of it. But as you see over time, they get crafty. They're like, oh, people are coming onto this. Let's change this around. And they just change these things around. That's why there's so many variations of the birth certificate, certificate of birth, record of birth, certificate of live birth. That's why with the social security cards, I think I even looked up the variations and they have changed and altered this card over like 100 times. And it's crazy. And so all over the world, banks have used your birth record because you are certified stock in maritime admiralty banking scheme, where you make money for the bank. So every time you have given your social security number out, you basically are doing this. You have a bank that the Treasury is the private banker of, but we have not had access to the private side because we signed up to go public. But we went public when our birth certificate went out on the stock market. So we've been operating on the public side. So that day, our birth certificate went public was the same time that we began doing business on the public side. So every time we have used our social security card numbers to get a loan and our signature to get a loan, we are basically picking up a third party and they are taking our signature, taking our social security number and going to the Treasury to get money from your own account. Y'all following me? From your own account and giving it to you for the loan and then collecting interest off of you by your signature. So they've taken it, they flipped that original contract. This is what they're doing. And so if you think of, if you have a house, if you have a car, basically we are saying, okay, well, we go to the car dealership or we go and we look for this house. And basically what we tell ourselves, we don't have.
Your backpack before you go to bed.
Please put your mic on mute. I'm hearing somebody need to go to bed. So you definitely want to be mindful when you're going to these places and you are thinking, I don't have the money, I could probably just put a down payment or whatever your thoughts are. What is actually happening in this process is that we are going to these places and we are requesting a lien holder to come in and borrow money from our own account. The actual borrower is them, not you, not I. They are borrowing money from the account. This is already our money. And I'm saying money, let me put this disclaimer that when I'm saying money, I'm talking about credit, because the United States has been bankrupt since, let me go back to my document, what I said here, has been bankrupt since 1788. So they don't have any money. All of the gold and silver that was once here and how America was just lawful and the Treasury had all this money, the gold is gone. They had to give that over to the Vatican. That's why you always hear about the Vatican having all the gold, having all our resources, having all our books. That's where it is. All right. And so we have been backed on credit. And every time we use this lovely legal tender, Every time we use this legal tender, we are basically committing a crime because this is Federal Reserve notes. And if you have cash in front of you, I want you to look at it. It says, so this is what we know as a dollar, but if you read it, it says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. So this is basically making the debt of this nation greater because this is actual paper and they're just printing off as we continue to use it, and we're basically drowning over here. And so what I see in the tie of the connection is that as the United States becomes more bankrupt and overpopulated, they're needing to, one, depopulate, but also what I was connecting, I started connecting some dots yesterday, was that this Cestui Que Vie Act ties into all of this. If we're all considered dead and lost at sea, if we did not claim our estate, then therefore we are basically going to never have to be a problem for them as we don't know about this information. And that's what I'm thinking is that, you know, as they are trying to patent people and take more ownership, because we know with the birth certificate, that's the first order of control, controlling the person, the straw man, ourselves, our name, and then the next phase, patenting, because they've been patenting the coronavirus, for those of you that don't know. And they've tried before in 2013 to patent human DNA, but they could not because it is a natural moving substance. So they were saying you cannot, but in the case of certain vaccines, which they mentioned Myrna in this Supreme Court ruling of 2013, that in the case of a person injecting themselves with that, they could patent that DNA because the person would be considered less organic, genetically modified. So I want to add that piece in there because it's important to talk about, and the stakes of where we're at right now and how crucial it is to be taking all of this in, processing, doing your own research, and starting this process to take ownership and control. Well, we'll never be owners, but we definitely want to control our straw man and start rescinding things. So I'm going into this next piece where I do need to cover nationality and how we got to where we are today in terms of how what we choose as our nationality, as ethnicity, race, how that impacts where we are, how this impacts what our ancestors once had, and how we have come to lose our land and lose, you know, certain aspects of ourselves over time throughout this process. And usually I go into speaking on nationality because it is a huge piece in this process, but it really is its own separate lane. And so they both have their own step and processes that need to be completed. But I'm going to share this video with you, and I do highly encourage that you look up Dane Calloway. This is a guy, he's on YouTube. He also has an Instagram, but he has some very vital information, and he really unpacks history very well. You know, the history we were taught in school did not teach us any of this stuff, but that goes to say why, because they want you to be a part of the program. They want you to be caught up in the matrix. They want you to be watching this fake news. They want you to stay busy and not have the time to focus on you and getting your affairs together and correcting your political status so you can pretty much still stay a lab rat and work for their corporations. All right. So if y'all still with me, throw some love in the chat box. Let me know. And let me know if I'm going too fast. If you have any questions so far, now is the time before we go into this next video clip. All right. All right, great. So many of us have ancestors who once had land here. And as we date back to just going back, and I've used this as an example before, and I only talk about it for the sake of the fact that many of us have watched or known about Pocahontas. But I want to say, and I want you to write this down. I appreciate the love in the chat box, that you want to write this down and you want to read the Papal Dums Diversas. This was a decree that was issued in 1452. And basically the Pope had instructed the Portuguese and Spaniards to invade, capture, vanquish, subdue all Caesareans, Muslims, pagans, and any other enemies of Christ, to put them in perpetual slavery and take away possessions and property. And this is very important because if you imagine, we were told that our ancestors came in on a slave ship, and it's just kind of funny thinking about it because it was hammered into my head. Let me know in the chat box, was it hammered into your head in school that, Black people, African Americans were, enslaved for 400 plus years, came in on a slave ship? That's all I could think of when I think of history, but we need to tell the truth. And the what I believe and what I'm hearing from many other seasoned individuals who have been researching this history is that, it's actually in reverse. And so I want you to do your own research in regards to that and actually read the Dums Diversas decree and what it actually says. I bring up this movie Pocahontas because I think of the multitudes of women that represented the Aboriginal people. And what we should have gathered from that movie, one, is that we were already here. Aboriginal people, American Indian, Native Americans, please mute your mic. We're already here. And the Europeans came, and also remember this decree was issued. So, they were already coming, putting people into perpetual slavery. And so this particular clip and what I made the connection with is that, all right, I appreciate it. I can't, okay, I'm looking in the chat box, but this perpetual slavery going on, but just reading into Pocahontas, her story, someone's mic needs to be muted, and I'll know for next time to put everybody's mic on mute myself. But basically with Pocahontas, she was captured and held for ransom by colonists during the hostilities of 1613. During her captivity, she was encouraged to convert to Christianity because, if you think of the earlier these times, Native Americans or Aboriginal people, they had the land here, they had their own spirituality, they had their own, tribes going on. And we can talk about that. I'll bring that up, the 5 civilized tribes that were already going on, and they bartered and traded amongst themselves. And then here come the Europeans, the colonists, trying to colonize, trying to take over, first learning how things operated and then taking over. Because remember how I had explained that the Pope had created these trusts in the city of London. And these trusts were to take all the land, all the bodies, all the souls of people through baptism. So here they are coming, showing up, converting people to Christianity and changing their name. Pocahontas and Rebecca, come on, y'all. So imagine how many of our names have changed. What people of these tribes used to do is pray and meditate to find out what this baby's name would be. They would pray to God, wait for an answer, and they would get this name. That name had meaning, and the tribe would make sure this individual would never forget who they are, where they came from. And many of us, we don't know who we are. We don't know who we came from. I'm telling you just my own personal experience with my parents. It's like pulling teeth trying to ask them, what is our heritage? What is it? Anybody else experience that? It's like they don't know or have an idea, but it's really not clear. And that goes to say a lot about our history and how far we've come from being programmed and put further into this system and, you know, being brainwashed with what is actually not true. I appreciate that. You know, I'm just keeping it real. It's all I know to do. So, you know, it's important that we share these aspects because our ancestors, I feel like they're screaming out to us like, you got to, definitely to me, like, we need to know this stuff. We need to know our heritage. We need to get back connected to that period, let alone the land. And, you know, that those are other aspects of it, but the government knows exactly what land your ancestors had, knows exactly what they was connected to, because they were actually a part of those early you know, decision makings, acts and laws that were passed. They were a part of those Republican parties at the time, and they try to just act like, you know, we have Black Wall Street too. There's a lot of pieces that are misconstrued and covered up with lies, and, you know, whole history books created that leave certain areas out, just like the Bible. Like, you know, there's missing books of the Bible and certain resources and things that were stolen. Why? Because they're trying to keep the knowledge from us. Because if we get so much to a innerstanding and overstanding and start to rise up, they're gonna have a whole problem on their hands. So this is what we need to do in this process. And I needed to share that piece of nationality and bring you to how Black Americans lost their land. And, you know, I'm calling Black Americans, but what I'm saying is Aboriginal people, how we lost their land. And I'm going to talk about a form, and then we're going to dive into some questions and the steps we need to take. All right, here we go.
Ever since we began to see people like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X appearing on national media stations and television programs alike, protesting and campaigning for many call to action purposes, you would see those same tactics utilized today, but in a much more provocative sense. And here's what I mean by that. Protesting and marching and the consistent need to vote for a political representative was assembled and heavily campaigned by both parties of the political spectrum. And the copper-colored people were manipulated into believing that their vote will count towards something positive for their own benefit, and things will be changed for the better good for their community's sake. But that promise has been made over and over and over again. And look at what happens. You see how your voice doesn't count when it comes to yelling for justice, right? Now, just ask yourself, why would you believe that your vote counts as if it'll actually change anything for the better? Think history isn't telling you otherwise? Now, we can recall learning in school about how our ancestors were not allowed the right to vote until the passing of the 15th Amendment, which was ratified February 3rd, 1870. And according to the National Archives and Records Administration, on pages 61 and 62 of the milestone documents of 1995, the so-called Negroes, quote, exercised the franchise and held office in many southern states through the 1880s. But in the early 1890s, steps were taken to ensure subsequent white supremacy. Literacy tests for the vote, grandfather clauses, excluding from the franchise all whose ancestors had not voted in the 1860s, and other devices to disenfranchise African Americans were written into the constitutions of former Confederate states. Okay, so there's a few things here. Okay, this was pretty deep right here. And I didn't want this to fly past at all. This has to be explained. Remember when I was telling you guys that they implemented white supremacy in the 1890s? Okay, now okay, I'm going to explain in this video what that means, but this automatically lets you know that we were in office. Okay, we exercised the franchise and held office in many southern states. Now, that's even prior to the 1880s, by the way. That's going back to 1850s, 1860s. So I'm pointing out what happened, okay? And I need you guys to focus on that. I'm pointing out when it happened and what happened, in order for us to not only lose our lands, but it's just our property in general. Like our power. And that's what I need you guys to focus on. But let me keep going. Steps were taken to ensure subsequent white supremacy. Literacy tests for the vote, grandfather clauses, excluding from the franchise all whose ancestors had not voted in the 1860s, and other devices to disenfranchise African Americans were written into the constitutions of former Confederate states. End quote. I would like for you to note this portion of the quote where it says, exercised the franchise and held office in many southern states, because this is how you know that our ancestors were prospering as capitalists in this society during this time period, being as though they were able to run businesses, create franchises, hold elections, and office as a franchisor. Each business can elect one who is chosen, or they may select one who is handpicked to take in office or employment, meaning that the business can either elect or select its president, vice president, secretary, or treasurer, just to name a few things as an example. But somehow this phrase was merged into moving from business to more of a political sense. Pay attention to this part where the definition of franchise is now being associated with both the right to vote in public elections and an authorization granted by a government or company to an individual or group, enabling them to carry out specified commercial activities. With the franchisor being the person or company that grants a franchise, and the franchisee being the person or company doing business under the name or mark of another franchise. It is an elaborate agreement under which the franchisee does business in accordance with methods and procedures prescribed by the franchisor. That should sound familiar. Right there. That should sound familiar right there. But I'm gonna stop stopping because I believe I go into it and I just don't want to repeat myself, but that's very important to please pay attention to. And then I'm going to be explaining who are these franchisors and franchisees. And that's very important, guys. You got to understand what happened to us. Pay attention. A collective bargaining agreement should ring a bell here, which is nothing more than a legal binding contract. I share more about that here. Those of you that might not know, for starters, collective bargaining is the process of negotiating the terms of employment between an employer and a group of promising employees. A collective bargaining agreement is a formally written, legally enforceable contract that could be valid up until any written specified time period between the owner or equivalent decision makers of an organization and its employees represented by an independent trade union. Now, that's also an indenture It's a contract. It works the same way as it did when slavery existed. This is the reason why I keep telling you guys this is a form of employment. Okay? So you have to listen to what happened. Now, even if you don't believe me, you're going to know based on what happened. Okay? I'm going to get into that. I'm not going to take up too much of the time because I know that needs to be explained, and it will be explained. But I need you to focus on what I'm stating right here for very particular reasons. It's going to line right up. Sounding familiar at all to you yet? Let's take things a step further. Listen closely. According to the 1828 Webster's English Language Dictionary, the noun bargain is defined as, quote, an agreement between parties concerning the sale of property or a contract by which one party binds himself to transfer the right to some property for a consideration, and the other party binds himself to receive the property and pay the consideration, end quote. It goes on to say that the verb bargain means to make a contract or conclusive agreement, often with for before the thing purchased, as to bargain for a house. A bargained with B for his farm, end quote. So with all of that being said, we can determine that the CBA that's being held by the Indian child represents a binding labor contract, or also known as an indenture of servitude, which is known nowadays as an application for employment or a work for hire agreement. And what was this bargain, you ask? Well, who else was promised lots of things only once they have completed cultivating America from the ground up, like acres of land, for example, and they never received them? According to the International Franchise Association, under the title Foundations of Franchising, it states, quote, every franchise relationship is founded on the mutual commitment of both parties to fulfill their obligations under the franchise agreement. Each party will fulfill its obligations, will act consistently with the interests of the brand, and will not act as to harm the brand and system. This willing interdependence between franchisors and franchisees and the trust and honesty upon which it is founded has made franchising a worldwide success as a strategy for business growth, end quote. In which all of this should make you wonder, could it be possible that once a person signs up to vote, then that individual has now consented to entering into a legal binding contract? Inadvertently? Listen.
Mr. Carmichael, do you see any change in atmosphere in the South? Do you think that we are approaching a more militant or revolutionary stage in the civil rights movement in the South?
Yes, I certainly think so. I think we're moving now into a political arena. And I think that what Negroes are now tampering with will touch the entire country. To be very precise, for example, many Negroes who registered to vote have been evicted from their lands in Lowndes County. People who have worked on plantations for 35, 40 years because they registered to vote have been evicted. So that raises a philosophical question, not only for us, but for the whole country. Can property-less people be made as equal as property owners through the vote?
A legal binding contract that purposely removes certain constitutional rights away from you, that in turn forces an individual to fulfill obligations and act consistently with the interests of the brand that they choose or were forced to do business with. This is uncommonly known as the evolution of slavery, since steps were taken in the early 1890s to ensure subsequent white supremacy. by the formal use of devices like literacy tests and grandfather clauses to ensure the disenfranchisement of the American Indians as young children.
All right. Whew, that was a lot. So I definitely need you to watch the full clip of that, but let me know your thoughts. Feel free to open up your mic and share, ask questions. But this is what we're going into, is explaining this piece of how land was lost and how we need to get back connected to that, knowing our nationality, knowing where we come from, knowing that history is the connection we need to bridge the gap. So we've filled out forms like this SF-181 form. And usually you're filling it out when you're getting your social security card, or if you had your name changed before. And I fill it out now twice. My name has been changed and didn't even think anything of it, you know. That video talks about these contracts, these legal binding contracts that we have signed into and put ourselves through servitude of chasing this dream of the pie in the sky, where we've been further putting ourselves into their system, and it has left us with nothing. And so they're looking for us to continue to select off the box that is not connected to our tribal affiliation. They're continuing to create documents and clauses and acts that push us further away from having anything. And it's the have and the have-nots. And so we're needing to correct our political status. We're needing to correct what we chose for ethnicity and race, and understand that this is all a game. It is all a game being played, and that our original contract, that birth certificate, a certificate of live birth, has been used against us, and we are needing to take control of that. So if we look at this form, ethnicity and race identification form, let me know if you're still here. Y'all are quiet. Let me see you move in that chat box if you are taking all of this in. I know it's a lot of information, and we are about to close up and get into some of the steps that we can take. And so this ethnicity and race form, I appreciate your responses. Yes, taking it all in. It's a lot. It's a lot. So this ethnicity and race form, you know, there was voting. We were told, hey, voting is going to be good for us. So, you know, there was the parties, the Republican parties, and then it became the Republican Democrats, and they've used all of these ways and methods to just further create a corrupt system. And that's the best way that I can put it. A corrupt system, you know, I'm just reading some of this Privacy Act statement, you know, plan for equal opportunity of employment, and the Naturalization Act came in. So going back to, you know, when I mentioned Pocahontas, just using her as an example, just thinking of during that time and pushing and encouraging Aboriginal people to convert, to change their name, to where we are today. These things all mattered, and the Naturalization Act naturalized, colonized, pushed people that had land and didn't need to become a US citizen to become US citizens, which is why we are needing to not be a 14th Amendment slave chattel citizen and become US nationals, needing to change so many aspects, because all of these things has tied us into jurisdictions, the jurisdiction of our state. So each state operates on the public and private side. So for example, I'm in the state of Georgia. So there's the Republic of Georgia, and the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia operates on the public side, and then there is the private side, which is the republic, which is sovereign, which is what we are needing to be, sovereign, living souls. But they have pushed us to the public to operate, to do business on our name, trade on our name, have this corporation entity in our name. So documents like this SF 181, we would go through the Social Security Administration to change it. So let's dive on into it. Question 1, are you Hispanic or Latino? And I want you to really pay attention to these differences here. The definitions that they give of it: a person of Cuban, Mexican, Puerto Rican, South and Central American, or other Spanish culture or origin, regardless of race. Okay, question 2, please select the racial category or categories in which you most closely identify with. So the first, American Indian or Alaskan Native, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of North and South America, including Central America, and who maintains tribal affiliation or community attachment. Now, I know myself, I've been told that I am Black. I've known from my parents, you know, when we think of our birth certificate is based off of our parents, what they selected. If they selected Black or African American, let's just dive on into that and what it says. A person having origins in any of the Black racial groups of Africa. Nothing of the original people. Asian, a person having origins in any of the original people of the Far East, Southeast Asia, or the Indian subcontinent, including, for example, Cambodia, China, India, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Pakistan, the Philippine Islands, Thailand, and Vietnam. Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, a person having origins in any of the original people, Hawaii, Guam, Samoa, or Pacific Islands. White, a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, or North Africa. Listen, the only one here, but the one that I know I was told, and any other people that have identified as Black have been selecting Black or African American, a person having origin, or Hispanic or Latino, the same. Those two categories do not connect or tie you into any of the original people of any land or any tribal affiliation. Why? They specifically created this way and created, you know, those terms, and had leaders at the time be brainwashed into promoting Black power, saying I am Black, and Black being a thing. That helped them further push this marketing idea with this racial category to plug us into a system that is not tied to anything. And so because of this, many of us have selected these categories, not even realizing that it is pulling us from any possibilities of any tribal affiliations or land that our ancestors could have or once had. If we go into, and I'm just going to put in Georgia, you can do this on your own, but we are considered property of the state. How we became property of the state the day our birth certificate became registered. So we are property, anything attached to us, our estate is property. Who's controlling it? The state is controlling these properties. And when you die, physically, they make more money off your name. And when we don't know about what's going on like we do here, they're making money off of our name. Our goal is to get what we are entitled to get, our remedy and equity in every single area where we have been charged debt on the behalf of our strawman, because we are not our strawman. We can never be a corporation. This is why, let's say you get pulled over by the police and they are like license and registration. They're not asking you your name. They're not looking to talk to you. They need your license and registration to verify your business entity, your corporation, which is your name in all caps. That's who they're looking to confirm and start talking to, because property can only talk and deal with property. We all play Monopoly, I think. And we're dealing with monopoly money out here. And this is literally a game. So we can choose to be a part of the game, or we can choose to sit in jail and, you know, keep allowing other pieces to pass go and not collect anything. So it really is determined on you and the decision that you make, but this is a process. You know, I myself, I think in 30 years of life, never heard of any of this information until literally a couple months ago. And when I learned about this information, oh, I went ham. Like, I went researching this, getting books on this, because I'm like, how I felt like I was living in a whole time warp, like literally the movie The Matrix, and like Neo coming to like, I know there's more. And trust me, the rabbit hole goes so far, it's not even funny. But every state has a website under the Department of Revenue that is of unclaimed property. And usually it, you know, it takes but a second to do a search and finds out, you know, if you have, you yourself, parents, anybody, you can put their information in, and it is a free service for you to see if there's any unclaimed property, whether it's land, whether it's houses, whether it is a check, you worked at some job and then you moved and they couldn't find you. This is literally unclaimed property. This is literally attached to your accounts. And when we change and correct our status, our nationality, and we become private, secured parties and creditors, we get this access. But there's no jumping over into just discharging debt. It's an entire process, because imagine you have a business. You now have to take control over this business, to control over your names, control over the properties and the statuses within it. And this, you're putting these debt collectors on public notice that you're coming back, and you're coming back full force to claim and take control of everything.